The morning sun spilled through the curtains, soft and golden, just like the warmth that filled Elena's heart. Today was the day she had waited for all her life, her daughter Hira's graduation. Every late night she spent sewing Hira's uniforms when money was tight. Every skipped meal so her daughter could eat. Every sleepless night spent worrying about school fees today. It all felt worth it. She stood before the mirror, adjusting the light peach scarf around her shoulders. Her reflection showed faint lines of exhaustion, yes, but also the quiet pride of a mother who had given her everything. "You did it, Mary Bacchai," she whispered, picturing Hira in her graduation gown. "Today, the world will see what I've always known, that you are destined for greatness." Her husband, Camel, emerged from the bedroom, looking sharp in his dark suit. His face was unreadable, distant, but Elena brushed it off. Lately, he had been cold, withdrawn, claiming he was too stressed with work. She had convinced herself it was nothing, that today's joy would bring them closer again. After all, hadn't they built this life together? The drive to the university was filled with chatter, Hira bubbling with excitement, Elena beaming with pride, and Camel silent. He stared out the window, fingers drumming against his knee, his jaw set in a way that Elena couldn't quite understand. She chose to ignore it. Nothing, she thought, could ruin today. The graduation hall glittered with flowers and balloons. Families clapped, cameras flashed, and students adjusted their gowns nervously. Elena's heart swelled as she spotted her daughter walking onto the stage. Hira looked radiant, her smile wide, her eyes shimmering with tears. "That's my girl," Elena whispered, squeezing Camel's hand, but he didn't squeeze back. When Hira's name was called, Elena clapped the loudest. Her palms stung, but she didn't care. Years of sacrifice had blossomed into this single, perfect moment. She wiped her tears, watching her daughter shake hands with the dean, the tassel swaying proudly on her cap. As the ceremony ended, families poured into the courtyard, hugging, laughing, taking pictures. Elena gathered Hira into her arms, her tears dampening the edge of her daughter's gown. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered, but then, without warning, Camel cleared his throat. His voice was loud, louder than the surrounding chatter. "Too loud, I have something to say," he announced. The laughter around them quieted. Curious eyes turned their way. Elena frowned, confused as Camel stepped forward. Hira froze, still smiling, not yet sensing the storm about to break. Camel's words dropped like a stone into water, sending ripples of shock through the crowd. "I can't do this anymore. Elena, I'm leaving you. I should have done this years ago." The world spun. Elena's breath caught in her throat. She blinked, certain she'd misheard him, but the gasps from the people around them confirmed the truth. Whispers erupted. Some covered their mouths in shock, others exchanged knowing glances, and someone muttered, "Here, at his daughter's graduation." Elena felt her knees weaken. Her vision blurred, her heart pounding so loudly she could hear nothing else. She wanted to scream, to ask him why, but no sound came out. Her hands trembled as she clutched the edge of her scarf, her face pale with disbelief. Hira's smile had faded, her eyes wide with horror. "Abu, what are you saying?" she stammered, but Camel didn't stop. His face was cold, cruel, as though he had rehearsed this moment. "I've wasted years pretending in this marriage. There's someone else now, someone who makes me feel alive. I refuse to keep living a lie." The crowd erupted into murmurs. Someone gasped loudly. Elena's heart cracked into 1,000 jagged pieces. She felt stripped bare, humiliated, destroyed, and the cruelest part was he had chosen this moment, their daughter's triumph, to throw her into the fire. Her tears burned, but she refused to let them fall in front of him. She pressed her lips together, trembling, her chest rising and falling as if the air itself had betrayed her. Hira turned to her mother, her voice breaking. "Ammi," but Elena couldn't answer. She stood frozen, her pride and her love shattered under the weight of Camel's betrayal. The perfect day had turned into a nightmare, and nothing would ever be the same again. The ride home from the graduation was unlike anything Elena had ever experienced. Hira sat in the back seat, her cap clutched in her trembling hands, eyes brimming with unshed tears. Camel drove in silence, his jaw clenched, his phone lighting up every few minutes with messages Elena dared not read. She wanted to scream to demand answers, but the words lodged in her throat like thorns. The house that once felt like a home now seemed cold, alien. As soon as they stepped inside, Camel tossed his keys on the table and muttered, "I'll be moving my things out soon." With that, he disappeared into the bedroom, leaving mother and daughter standing in the living room, the air heavy with betrayal. Hira turned to her mother, her face pale. "Ammy, how could he do this to you, to us, on my graduation day?" Her voice cracked, and the sob she had been holding back finally broke free. Elena pulled her daughter into her arms. For the first time since the humiliation at the ceremony, she allowed her tears to flow, hot and relentless. "I don't know, Baka," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I don't know." That night, Elena lay awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling. Memories swirled like ghosts, each one cutting deeper than the last. She remembered the early years of their marriage, how Camel had lost his first job and sank into despair. She had taken extra shifts at the school where she worked, sewing clothes at night just to make ends meet. She had sold her gold bangles, gifts from her parents, to pay his debts. She had stood by him when others mocked him, when his own relatives called him a failure. And this was her reward. She pressed her fists to her chest, trying to contain the ache inside. How could he betray decades of love and loyalty? How could he discard her so easily, as though she were nothing more than an old coat to be thrown away? In the days that followed, the house grew emptier. Camel moved his things out, each box he carried away a reminder that he was choosing someone else. He didn't even bother to hide his calls anymore. Sometimes, Elena would hear him laughing softly into his phone in the next room, a sound that once melted her heart but now pierced it like a blade. The gossip spread quickly. Relatives called, some with pity, others with veiled judgment. "He must have had his reasons. You should have kept yourself better." Their words stung worse than silence. Elena withdrew into herself, her days passing in a blur of chores and quiet tears. But she never broke down in front of Hira. No matter how shattered she felt inside, she forced a small smile when her daughter was around. Hira needed stability, not another storm. One evening, as she sat alone in the kitchen, her eyes swollen from crying, she caught sight of a framed photo on the wall. It was from years ago. Camel and her, young and full of dreams, holding baby Hira between them. For a long moment, Elena stared at that picture, the woman in it almost unrecognizable. "Where did she go?" she whispered to herself. Her reflection in the glass looked tired, beaten. But then, somewhere deep inside, something stirred. A voice, quiet but firm. "You are not weak. You survived storms before. You will survive this too." Elena wiped her tears and sat up straighter. She realized that Camel's betrayal had broken something in her. Yes, but it had also freed something. For years she had lived in his shadow, measuring herself by his moods, his successes, his failures. But now there was nothing left to lose. That night, she promised herself one thing. She would rise, not just for Hira, but for herself. And when she did, Camel would regret ever thinking she was disposable. Her heart was still raw, her body still heavy with grief. But somewhere deep inside the broken pieces, a spark had ignited. A quiet strength that even betrayal could not destroy. Months passed, the sharp sting of betrayal dulled into a constant ache, like a bruise that refused to heal. The world kept moving. Hira started an internship. Neighbors carried on with their lives, and Camel paraded his new happiness, shamelessly. Elena, however, walked a quieter path. On the outside, she seemed calm, almost resigned, but inside, she was building something. At first, it was survival. Bills had to be paid, the house maintained, Hira's future secured. With Camel's attention elsewhere, Elena quickly realized she could no longer rely on him for stability. She dug out her teaching certificates, updated her resume, and started applying for jobs. Soon, she was hired as an assistant teacher at a private school. The pay was modest, but it was hers. It was independence. Every paycheck felt like a small victory, proof that she wasn't helpless. The whispers of relatives she'll never manage on her own only fueled her determination. Each evening after work, she sat at the dining table, balancing budgets, planning expenses, mapping out a future that no longer included Camel. Hira watched her mother's resilience in awe, silently drawing strength from her example. But Elena wasn't just rebuilding. She was observing and waiting. Camel, drunk on his new life, grew careless. He flaunted his new partner, buying her jewelry, taking her to expensive restaurants, posting pictures online. Friends whispered to Elena about how recklessly he was spending. At first, she dismissed it. After all, wasn't it his money? But then, one evening, while reviewing old files in the study, she stumbled upon documents Camel had left behind. Bank statements, business contracts, loans, and what she saw made her blood run cold. Camel had been siphoning money from joint accounts, forging signatures, even using their house as collateral without her consent. He wasn't just selfish. He was reckless, desperate, and dangerous. Elena sat frozen, her fingers trembling over the papers. Rage burned through her veins, hotter than she had ever felt before. All those years she had trusted him, defended him, sacrificed for him. And this was what he had done behind her back. But this time, instead of collapsing into tears, Elena smiled, slowly, coldly, because now she had a weapon. She spent weeks gathering proof, carefully, quietly, every receipt, every forged document, every shady transaction. She collected them all, tucking them away in a folder no one knew existed. Meanwhile, she carried on as though nothing had changed. When Camel came to the house, strutting in with his arrogance, Elena greeted him with polite indifference. When he boasted about his business successes, she only nodded. Inside, however, she was already planning the moment he would choke on his own lies. Her transformation didn't stop there. With Hira's encouragement, Elena started doing things for herself, things she had long buried under the weight of marriage. She enrolled in an evening class to finish her long, abandoned master's degree. She joined a women's book club, made new friends, and even started exercising again. Slowly, she began to rediscover the woman she used to be before she lost herself in Camel's shadow. And all the while, Camel spiraled further into arrogance. He believed he had won, that Elena was defeated, humiliated, forgotten. He had no idea that every careless step he took was tightening the noose Elena was quietly preparing. One afternoon, as Elena filed another set of papers into her secret folder, she whispered to herself, "You took my dignity in front of the world, Camel, but I'll take something from you you'll never get back, your pride." For the first time in months, her reflection in the mirror didn't look broken. It looked fierce, determined, powerful. The seeds of revenge had been sown, and Elena knew, when the time came to strike, she would not miss. The day came sooner than Elena expected. It was Hira's engagement ceremony, a joyous occasion where family and friends gathered. Music played softly, and the house was lit with warm golden lights. Elena, dressed in a deep emerald sari, moved gracefully among the guests, her smile calm, her heart steady. Today was about her daughter's future, about hope and new beginnings, but fate had one more stage prepared for her. Camel arrived as arrogant as ever, striding into the hall with his new partner on his arm. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some people turned away in disgust, others whispered behind their hands. Yet Camel seemed immune, basking in the attention, as though this humiliation was his stage. "Elena," he called out loudly, his voice carrying across the room. "I hope you don't mind us joining. After all, I'm still here as father, whether you like it or not." Elena turned slowly, her face serene, her eyes unreadable. "Of course," she said evenly, "no one is stopping you." Her calmness unsettled him. He expected anger, bitterness, maybe tears, but not this. He sneered, trying to regain control. "You know, everyone." Camel continued, raising his voice for maximum effect. I must say I've never been happier since I left this arrangement. Life is finally worth living. Some people, he shot a mocking glance at Elena, are better suited alone. Laughter rippled from a few of his shallow friends. Elena's fingers tightened around the glass she held, but her face remained composed. She glanced toward Hira, who looked furious, ready to lash out. Elena gave her daughter a small nod, silently saying, "Not yet." The moment had arrived. Elena walked to the center of the hall, her sari shimmering under the lights. She raised her voice, calm but commanding. "Since we're all here, and since Camel has chosen this gathering to speak so freely," she began, "I believe it's time the truth is known." The room fell silent, all eyes turned to her. Camel shifted uncomfortably, but his smirk stayed. "What truth?" He scoffed. Elena reached into her handbag and pulled out a neatly bound folder. She held it up for all to see. "The truth of your lies, Camel. Your fraud, your betrayals, every forged document, every stolen rupee, every illegal deal you thought I'd never discover." Gasps echoed through the hall. Someone whispered, "Fraud." Camel's smirk faltered. You don't know what you're talking about." But Elena's voice grew sharper, stronger. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about. I have proof, copies of every transaction, every signature you faked, even the mortgage you put on this house without my consent. You thought I was blind, Camel, but I saw everything. And so will the authorities." She opened the folder, pulling out papers and holding them high. A hush fell over the guests as they craned their necks to see. Camel's face turned pale. His partner tugged at his sleeve, confused and alarmed. Elena stepped closer, her eyes blazing. "You humiliated me in front of the world, Camel. You broke your daughter's heart on her proudest day. You thought you had destroyed me. But today, everyone will see who you really are." Murmurs swelled into outrage. Camel's business associates, who were present at the engagement, exchanged uneasy glances. One of them muttered, "If this is true, we're finished." Another hissed, "He dragged us into this mess." Camel's confidence cracked. His voice rose, shrill with panic. "She's lying, she's making it up." But Elena cut him off. "The police won't think so. In fact, they're already investigating, and by tomorrow, they'll have everything they need." The room exploded in whispers. Camel's partner pulled away from him, her face twisted in disgust. "You said you were free, that you were successful. You didn't tell me about this." She stormed out, heels clicking angrily against the floor. Camel reached after her, but the weight of dozens of eyes dragged him down. He turned back to Elena, his face contorted, his voice breaking. "Elena, please, you can't do this to me. Don't ruin me." For the first time, Elena allowed herself a smile. "It wasn't cruel. It was calm, victorious. I'm not ruining you, Camel. You ruined yourself. I'm only showing the world the truth." He screamed then, a raw, desperate sound that echoed through the hall. But no one moved to comfort him. Not his friends, not his relatives, no one. The man who had strutted in with pride was now left standing alone, his empire crumbling before his eyes. Elena turned away, her sari trailing gracefully behind her, and walked toward her daughter. She took Hira's hand, squeezed it gently, and whispered, "It's over." As mother and daughter embraced, the music slowly returned, the lightness of celebration filling the room once more. For the first time in years, Elena felt free. The chains of betrayal had fallen away, replaced with strength, dignity, and peace. And as Camel's screams faded into the background, Elena knew one truth with certainty. Sweet revenge was best served not with rage, but with justice and with the grace of walking away stronger than ever